Cassandra lives in Chicago. She's a singer. She is a past board member and office holder of the National Association of Colored Women, where she was their COO, their national historian as well. Cassandra is now president of a local standard National Association of Colored Women's Club, and she's also a member of several local community organizations in Chicago and a local community officer in Chicago. An incredible woman. Hello, Cassandra.
Hello, Beatrice, and thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming and sharing. Cassandra, could you tell us about your connection to Betty Jackson King?
Well, Betty was a mentor. I knew about her from a very young age. I knew her through my parents. My parents were in a group called the Imperial Opera Company, and that's how they knew Betty and her sister Catherine and her mother Gertrude Jackson Taylor. When I was very young, I sang in one of Betty's opera. It was called The House of Job. And then when I got older and wanted to do some things in the community, I spoke with Betty's mother and I said, I'd like to do Job as a community fundraiser and event. And she said, no, uh, don't do Job, do Saul of Tarsus. And I said, Saul of Tarsus, what is that? Because I didn't remember that from all the stories from my parents or even being involved in it. And she says, well, I'll get Betty to call you. And that's how it all got started.
Amazing. So you really have a rich legacy of connection with this composer because you met her, but also your parents knew her. Your parents worked with her. Do you have any more memories about your parents collaborating musically with her?
Um, there was a operetta called Martha, and Mrs. Jackson Taylor always referred to it because my parents were courting. My mother was always in the Imperial Opera Company along with my aunt Muriel Clarkston. But when she started going around with my dad, he would go where she went. And so they were doing this operetta called Martha. And the opera company, I guess individuals were responsible for putting their own costumes together because
Okay.
they didn't have a costumer. So every member of the opera had a way of putting their own costume together. And my and Mrs. Jackson Taylor always laughed. She says, "Oh ho ho, Edgar came. Edgar was my dad. Came and he brought his long johns." And I'm like, okay, but I never saw the opera. But it was she was just saying you have to be careful when you tell people to bring their own costumes because their conception, I guess, of what their part is supposed to be translates into what they think they're supposed to bring for their for their costuming. When I produced Saul of Tarsus in 1987, I had a seamstress who did costumes for everybody. But
Mhm.
some of the old Imperial Opera Company people said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I know how to do it. We'll bring it. We'll bring it." And one of one of the people brought a bathrobe and a towel to wrap around there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we kind of use those a lot, in nativity plays in primary schools. It seems to be the go-to for biblical costumes. And this is a biblical opera. So, yeah, I can imagine someone pulling that out the bag.
Absolutely, and that was it. Because I think the person was supposed to be a shepherd of
Right,
some sort,
right.
something like some sort of shepherd type community member, and it didn't look bad or anything.
Mhm.
It's just that Edith, oh, I can't remember her last name right now. My seamstress, she was like really outdone, and I said, "You just can't say anything to him. Let him do this." You know?
That's
Edith
very
Gardner,
democratic, diplomatic of you.
yeah, Edith Gardner, that's what her name was. The other thing was that in 1987, we had more community members from the neighborhoods in Chicago
Mm-hmm.
who who were musicians. You know, some were associated with the National Association of Negro Musicians, some were not. Uh, but we did not pull from the Chicago chapter of NAM. We just had open discussion. If you want to be involved in, you know, we sent information, I sent information to churches and things, and I said, if you want to be involved, come and, you know, come and see. Salem Lutheran Church in Chicago, which is no longer in existence, but their music director was the one that did all the music for them, played it. And then we had another person who did the organ, because it's a music, it was set up as a piano organ based, yes, yeah, piano organ based operetta. We didn't really have any other kinds of instruments in,
Okay.
involved in it.
Yeah. But
And
I can just imagine that fitting the music so well. The first time I ever heard anything by Betty Jackson King, for me, was only 4 years ago.
mm,
And it was one of her art songs. And I was absolutely stunned by it, because it was classical music that was so well written and unusually had so much um, yeah, like African or Black heritage music sound in it. Like there was a touch of gospel, there was a touch of jazz, um, just all rolled into one.
yeah,
And I can imagine that organ sounding great. And some of the things you've told me about rehearsal, that the organist just improvise, and you weren't necessarily used to working with someone who would read classical sheet music. Um, but that kind of traditional oral way of playing music that is so, yeah, just so common in black communities and black churches.
well, I have to say that all of the musicians that I worked with when I was growing up, and then when I worked with musicals in the community and with Saul of Tarsus, all of the
Mm.
musicians had full musical backgrounds. They could read, they could improvise, they played by ear. If you
Mhm.
said take it up a notch, they knew how to take it up a notch.
Yeah, yeah.
And both times that I was involved in Saul being done, the pianist was the same. The pianist, either playing or as a consultant, was the same pianist that Betty had always used every time that she produced Saul of Tarsus. So this woman, I'm sorry I can't remember her name, but my goodness, she was just unbelievable. And then when you talk about the African influence, one of her mother's favorite parts of Saul was the section called Macedonia. Come on in, come over to Macedonia. And when we did each of the ones, the one in 83 and the one in 87, she got her people together as a chorus so that they could be the backdrop for that particular scene. They called themselves, even before the television show came out, they called themselves the Golden Girls.
Oh, nice. They had it
But
first, did they?
yeah, but there were golden men too. were involved, and Mrs. Taylor, Mrs. Jackson Taylor, led that group in that particular section of the opera, and
Mm.
you never had to worry about how it was going. But in 87, with so many people from the community, many of whom, yes, they sang in their groups and whatever, they weren't familiar with opera. Some of them were not familiar with Betty's piece. And well, there were some things that happened that were kind of funny, I thought. Uh, the main character, of course, is Saul, who becomes Paul the Apostle.
Yeah.
Okay, and so if you know the background of Saul, he was on his way to kill up a lot of folks because they didn't believe, he didn't believe in Jesus, and the Sanhedrin were behind him, and they gave him papers that said that he could do what he wanted to do. So he got stopped by God, Jesus, on the way to on the way on the road, and uh, he was blinded. So part of the opera, it takes place as he was blind, you know, when he was blind. And we had to have someone, because he couldn't walk around by himself, right? Because he's blind.
No.
Someone who would lead him. I think Ananias is the name of the guy, that the person that took care of him while he was blind. He didn't sing. There isn't a singing part there, but we had a gentleman named whose last name was also Jackson, no relation, uh, who actually was a Tuskegee Airman, believe it or not.
Okay.
He was a Tuskegee Airman in his past. And anyway, he sang in the choir at Salem Lutheran Church. So he was in charge of that. And because Saul was always done in a church, no matter what I did to how I tried to talk to Betty. I wanted to, you know, the first time I wanted a big stage and stage it in one of the theaters and stuff like. She says, no, Saul has to be done in a church. It has to be done in a church. So when 87 came, I just found a church that we went back to the same church, but I had found a church that was appropriate, had a big proscenium, you know, local church in our community, where you could stage it like you do a Sunday school play, where you could
Yeah.
stage. And this particular Rodney Jackson was the guy that was supposed to lead Saul around. He kept ducking under the pulpit. And after the actor who played Saul sang whatever he would sing and had to go on to another scene, then Rodney would come out from under the pulpit and grab him by the arm and walk him off the stage. It was, for me, it was hilarious because I kept saying, "Where's Rodney coming from?" And then I saw, oh, he's hiding under the pulpit. But Rodney had a wonderful voice. All the
Mhm.
people that both times, they all had wonderful voices. They had all had wonderful backgrounds. The churches that in the choirs that they sang in, or even in the community that they were, because we had a men's chorus called the Umbrian Chorale. They no longer exist. I think the Umbrians were almost 100 when I did the thing in 87. They gave us backdrop. In 87, what I had wanted to do is make sure I had the full sense of everything that Betty wanted to do in that opera.
Wow.
So before we started, I went around collecting pieces of music because everybody seemed to have a piece of music. I talked to her brother-in-law, Mr. Adams, Arlene Sharp's father,
Mhm.
and he had a big, huge chest full of hand script music that Betty had written. And then when I found out that Saul originally was her master's thesis at Roosevelt University here in Chicago, I went to the library and they had copies of Saul from there.
Nice, 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 nice.
And I added in um, things that she had taken out, not because there was something wrong with them, but because she was traveling the community between the time that she wrote it and the time that she went to do what she was doing at the college and then ended up in Wildwood. She had to shorten it, you know,
Mhm. Mhm.
and take
Yeah.
and adapt it for the community that she was presenting it in.
Sure,
And,
sure, sure.
and one of the things in there was a double chorus. And I had to think really hard about that because that's something that's very difficult to direct. And you have one full chorus one place and another full chorus.
Mhm.
And we had a full chorus in the balcony of this church, and a full chorus that was part of the players, in the area where we were actually where
Yeah.
everyone
So you had
just
a offstage chorus and then you had one on the stage.
and, and
Fabulous.
and if it had not been for the gentleman who had directed things, I don't think we would be able to pull it off. He not only directed it in terms of rehearsing everyone, but he was on the piano, and another gentleman was on the organ. It
Mhm.
was and the gentleman that was on the organ had been on the organ the first time in '83, working with her. So it turned out all right. Plus, I had actually put a book together, and I put it back, quote unquote, backstage, and I laid it out for the community members, and they would look at it to see when they would come in, and
Yeah.
finally, somebody said, "Oh, now we see what we're supposed to do. Now we understand." So it was not only a musical event for the community, it was a learning experience for myself, for everybody that was involved. And of course, it was a tribute to Betty, but unfortunately she was ill and she couldn't leave Wildwood, so she did
Mm.
not she did not see it. Hopefully,
It's
so
so,
hopefully heaven they're doing reruns.
oh, well, we'd love a couple more down here too. It's so unusual that you, as a child, got to sing in one of her productions, and then as an adult, put on her productions, um, adapt and restore part of her work. It's really special.